Hello, and welcome to demola. And today's lesson we are going through natural selection, adaptation, and speciation. How greedy. Probably one of my more favorite topics in ecology. So, no time to waste. Let's get straight into it.
Okay, so the first thing we need to cover is adaptation and niche. So, definitions are so important whenever we talk about biodiversity. Niche is the role of an organism in an ecosystem or habitat. And what's really important to know is every organism has one very specific and unique niche. So we can't have organisms in the same habitat that have the same niche. We can't have one organism having multiple niches in the same habitat. So for example, an Arctic fox is a predator for small mammals, right? Why is it important that each species has one niche? In this context, it regulates the population size. So for example, if we had another animal which was a predator for these small mammals, then that means the number of small mammals are going to go down. Arctic fox are going to die out because they don't have enough prey. Also, it means that your small mammals are going to die a lot more quickly. They won't be able to recover as much from this predation. So very important in terms of regulating population sizes, these predator-prey relationships. We know that organisms will also adapt over time. I'm sure this is something you covered from GCSE. And adaptation is a beneficial characteristic that helps an organism to survive in its habitat, if you want the full definition. So, what are we adapting to? We're going to talk more about adaptation in the next slide, but we're adapting to biotic and abiotic factors. So biotic, living, competition, infection, predation, those are the kind of things you're concerned about. Abiotic factors, you're non-living. So temperature, sunlight, water availability, these are all going to be things that affect, does your organism survive? And we want to make sure that we're maximizing our abilities to kind of cater to what our environment's about in these circumstances. So my wording's got a bit confused there, but I hope that made sense. And what's really important as well, just to know the types of adaptations we have. So behavioral actions an organism does, you can see the examples there. Migration, mating seasons, or like some animals are nocturnal. Physiological, internal body processes, venom production you'll see with some snakes, antibiotic resistance for a lot of bacteria as well, and anatomical. So these are your physical features. So like animals that live in the Arctic, Antarctica that have really thick fur to deal with the temperature. Camels have the humpback. Bats or even some other birds have wings so they can fly. These are kind of things that organisms will develop over time to help them to survive in their habitats. And this is going to be like the big money maker in this video, the process of natural selection. I think that this, if you literally memorize this definition, you can always pick up 4 to 5 marks in the exam. So know this process really, really well. So we'll just do a bit of prelude. Natural selection is literally just a method of evolution. And whenever you're defining evolution, really important definition, it's a change in allele frequency in a population over time. So we'll just highlight that as a definition for evolution, because definitions, like we said, are pivotal when you get to this topic. So organisms that are better adapted to the environment survive and they reproduce, right? So let's talk about this process. So first of all, we have a random mutation, right? So a random mutation will occur in the population, and we know that mutations will create new alleles, right? Organisms will face a specific selection pressure inside of their environment. And what do we mean? Selection pressure can be a biotic and abiotic factor. It's just something that is going to affect the survival of organisms. So for example, if there's a pandemic, a virus, then the organisms that are better adapted to surviving that virus are going to live. That's the selection pressure. Change in soil pH, if the plants are better able to withstand that, they're going to live, right? So due to the selection pressure, the organisms with the mutated alleles will survive, right? Because that allele is now advantageous because of the selection pressure. Cool. Organisms with the advantageous alleles survive and reproduce, passing on the advantageous allele to their offspring. And that means over many generations, more of the organisms are going to have that allele, right? So the allele frequency is going to go up of the advantageous allele. So in the population, it's just more common. Cool. That is the process of evolution by natural selection. I know that I've maybe said it in a way to kind of hopefully explain it better, but if you follow these steps that are just listed out there, you will pick up 4 or 5 marks every single time the question comes up. So have a go at that, but in the context of antibiotic resistance. So let's say to penicillin or something. Now, the Hardy-Weinberg equation. Don't want to spend too much time on this because I believe if you can get this down, again, pretty easy marks. But essentially, it's the formula that we use to determine that evolution is going on. And you can see the formulas there. So you've got p squared plus 2pq plus q squared is equal to 1, or p plus q equals 1. And I know, let's just quickly define that. P squared, heterozygous dominant individuals, 2pq, homozygous, and q squared, heterozygous recessive. And this is as a percentage or as a decimal of the whole population. So if observed values are not equal to the expected values, then we can say evolution is going on. But we need to know it's only valid, this equation, in certain circumstances, yeah? There couldn't have been any mutation in time, no random mating, no natural selection, a large population size, and no gene flow, as in no migration or emigration, right? Probably not going to happen in real life, I'd imagine, just me personally. But those are the ones that you need to know for your exams. So Hardy-Weinberg, I think pretty nice. You can normally apply that formula, but just know which one's heterozygous dominant, which one's heterozygous recessive, and you should be kind of good to go. Okay, so it's looking like a chunky video, but speciation is the last one we need to cover. And really important definition for species, really, really important, is a group of organisms that can interbreed to produce fertile offspring. And I need you to know, if you're not saying fertile offspring, you're not going to get the mark. Yeah? So a group of organisms that can interbreed to produce fertile offspring. And that also gives us the idea of reproductive isolation, which is that when a population can no longer interbreed to produce fertile offspring. So again, this fertile offspring is coming up. Yeah? We need to think, why does speciation happen, right? Well, it's because of the reproductive isolation, and that can happen in a bunch of different ways. So we have behavioral, different mating rituals, right? Temporal, different mating seasons. Mechanical, incompatible sexual genitalia. And ecological, maybe they live in the same area, but they have different habitats. So like, you could maybe get this in like kind of your deep sea creatures, where they might live at different depths of the sea based on like the oxygen requirements and everything like that. But these are going to be your main reasons why reproductive isolation occurs. Cool. Allopatric speciation versus sympatric speciation. Again, just good ones to know. So allopatric means that there's geographical isolation. So typically you'll maybe get like, there's like a hill, and then there's like a river separating it, and then there's another hill or something, and you'll have organisms A living here and species B living here, and then that's why they won't be able to interbreed. So that's why you'll get speciation now. Sympatric speciation is that they're not geographically isolated, so they kind of live in the same area, but then you're more looking at these kind of reasons as to why maybe that we're having speciation, right? Very important, and this is the last bit for this one, I promise, but we need to talk about genetic drift. So a genetic drift is found as a sudden change in allele frequency, and it normally happens for these two reasons that we talk about. So a genetic bottleneck is when we have a really sharp reduction in population size due to a natural event. So this could be a famine in the land, a pandemic that kills a bunch of the organisms, or a natural disaster, again, killing a bunch of organisms. Essentially, what's really happening is a large section of the population is dying off. So now you have a really small population left. Cool. The founder effect is another thing, where a small population gets cut off and forms a new group. So say, for example, we've got a stream of water. I'm really in my drawing bag today. We've got a stream of water, and say that maybe like a dam gets built here. These dots, or these organisms living here, are now separated from the rest of the people. So say there's more crosses. I know, drawing, wow. But yeah, those dots are now separated from the rest of the population, right? So this is going to form a new group. That's your founder effect. Now, in terms of why genetic drift is typically a bad thing, right? Reduces your population size. So we have less alleles, right? We have a lower genetic diversity. And if the genetic diversity is lower because there's less alleles, that means there's less ability to adapt to selection pressures. So now say in that small population in the founder effect, for example, say that now a virus comes, so many of the organisms can't survive the virus, that population is much more likely to die out and become extinct. So just think about that. I know this is a beefy chunk, so a lot to digest there, but we've kind of covered speciation. Okay, the learning is done, right? And now we just need to apply it to questions. So first one there, simple, just define what an allele is. And then looking at that, I want you to do the Hardy-Weinberg equation to show that more than 50% of the first elephant population is homozygous. So you've got the information there. Hopefully you'll be able to work it out from that. Now, what we also have here is a 6-mark question. I want you to really try this one. So again, like we're saying, pausing the video, having a go. But you're discussing why the number of sloth species may change in the future. And then finally, we've got this one, multiple choice question, just thinking about what adaptations are present based on that stem there. So I'm going to zoom out, give you some time, have a go at those questions, and then we'll get into the answer. Okay, so time to have a look at answers. So your first one was pretty straightforward, just in terms of defining a gene, defining an allele, sorry. So we're saying different version, different form of a gene, fine. So that's allele. Now, Hardy-Weinberg equation, there was 2 ways you could have done this. So We said specifically we're looking at the first element, so we're looking at here. And thankfully, we only have to look at these two alleles as well. So I looked at those two. It doesn't really matter which one you put as P and Q. And there was two ways you could have worked it out. So long way, like we know, our Hardy-Weinberg equation is P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared equals 1. So we could have done this way where we find P squared and Q squared, right? As you can see the workings out here. Add them up together, you'll find that that's the number of homozygotes. Or you could have just found the number of heterozygotes using the 2PQ bit, and 1 minus that would have got your answer. Now the 6th marker, so it was a discuss question, I believe, right? So the command word was discuss. So when we have discuss, we need to do for and against, right? So we need to talk y at the number, increase. And what you're thinking again is your speciation. So you're thinking there's geographical isolation. So we're thinking this is allopatric. And then once we've decided that, we can say different selection pressure and kind of rattle down your natural selection kind of pathway, right? If it decreased, we're thinking, okay, I think this would have maybe been given in the earlier part of the question, but you can think there was 2 areas where we had the other species, the Hoffmanni. There's 2 areas here, and there's only 1 for this one. So you can think probably a bit endangered, right? But even if you didn't say that, you could think if there's such a small place, small population, you're thinking inbreeding depression, which I didn't define, so I'll just say it's when we have mating between closely related individuals. That means that because the gene pool is so small, this species is really unlikely to adapt. That's what inbreeding depression is. So vulnerable to that, meaning natural disaster, predation, or a pandemic or anything, is going to really risk the species and they might become extinct. So then you might lose that species, and that's why it might go down. So you're really looking at the top answers here are kind of going through rattling down that whole process using the sustained application to the evidence from the table or the evidence from the graph and using their own scientific information. And then finally, this one, I'll just quickly show you that in yellow here, we have the anatomical, in green, we have the behavioral, and in orange, we have the physiological adaptations. Okay, so we're ready to wrap up the video now. We'll just go into the ASL tips. I know it's been a long one, so I'm going to try and be quick. But yeah, literally again, definitions, so important for this topic. So knowing and recalling the definitions gets you some easy marks. Understanding the process of evolution by natural selection. Like I said, if you can learn that whole thing, just kind of recite that, you will typically pick up almost all of the marks on the mark scheme. Know the Hardy-Weinberg equation. Again, I don't think that's too difficult to remember. So if you can remember it, fantastic. We'll get you some marks. Reproductive isolation is just a good one to know. So knowing your reasons for reproductive isolation and then kind of linking that to evolution or speciation is very important. And then the consequences of genetic drift is one that the examiners really like. So very, very good to know that as well. In terms of what we don't want to do, biotic, abiotic factors, just think biotic living, abiotic non-living. I think that A typically means like not or without, right? And then you're thinking the process of natural selection. I have said if you rattle off that thing, you will pick up most of the marks. But if you really want to get that extra bit, just relate it to the context of the question. So there will be context in the question. If you just relate it to the context, you typically will pick up an extra mark, maybe even 2 on a good day. So just be aware of that. Conditions for Hardy-Weinberg. I don't think it's common to come up, and it might just be a SNAB thing anyway. But I think if you can at least know 1 or 2 of them, that would just be a good idea. And then finally, types of speciation, your allopatric versus sympatric. Allopatric, geographical isolation. Sympatric, no isolation. So just know about those differences. Now, again, I'm trying to wrap it up quickly, but thank you so much for watching. I hope that's really helped to get a kind of understanding about these processes because they are quite important to the A-level biology. If you liked it, please like the video, would be greatly appreciated, and subscribe. I can finally say we are on the road to 1K, we're about 100 away. So I would really, really appreciate subscribing to the channel as well. Any questions at all about any of this, please put them in the comments below. I'll do my very, very best to answer in a timely manner, especially because exams are around the corner. We've got our TikTok and our Instagram, both at ASL Demola, putting content out there every week. So please give those a follow. And that's all from me from now. So I'm going to let you off now. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a good one. Bye for now.